stand by. We're about to begin. Good day and welcome to the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse webinar entitled, How Can Fathers Address Bullying Issues with Their Children? At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Mr. Patrick Patterson. Please go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Noah. Good afternoon, happy holidays, and welcome everyone to the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse's December 2014 webinar entitled, How Can Fathers Address Bullying Issues with Their Children? We have received rounds of feedback from the field and from many of you who are on the line today, so we want to thank you for your input on making this webinar a priority for us. As our host mentioned, my name is Patrick Patterson. I'm the manager for the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse and will facilitate today's webinar. We also want to make sure that each of you are participating throughout today's webinar, not just through today's technology, but also if you're on social media, want to invite you to follow us and or communicate with us during today's webinar. You can find the Fatherhood Clearinghouse on Facebook, Fatherhood.gov, or on Twitter at Fatherhood.gov. So both of those are consistent, Fatherhood.gov on Facebook and Fatherhood.gov on Twitter. We have a real strong lineup today of presenters, and I'm very excited to introduce them very soon. Before we get started, I'd like to invite our project officer in Washington, D.C., Ms. Lisa Washington-Thomas, to make a few opening comments. Lisa?
Thanks, Patrick, and thank you for coming to our webinar today. Bullying has become a major issue for children and youth, and although estimates vary, it's understood that a significant portion of our youth today are victims of some kind of bullying. And today with the internet, there is a new challenge to prevent cyberbullying. Being targeted by a bully can have significant consequences for the victim. In fact, many victims feel alone, isolated, and humiliated. And if bullying is left unaddressed, a number of other issues can crop up, including depression, eating disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and even suicide. For this reason, it is important that fathers and educators realize that bullying is not a rite of passage, and it won't make victims stronger. Instead, it has a lasting consequence and should be dealt with swiftly and effectively. But the good news is that fathers play a tremendous role in helping this, and helping and teaching their children how to behave, how to treat each other, and how to avoid violence like bullying. Although children will be children, sometimes that statement is not safe or funny. Fatherhood programs play a crucial role in helping dads understand ways that they can help their children to handle their emotions and prevent bullying. So we have a great program. We have 3 dynamic speakers waiting for you, and Patrick will introduce them just a little later. So thank you again for coming, and I turn this back over to Patrick.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for those opening comments, and everything that you said I just echo, because we have a major opportunity here. And so I want to just highlight real quickly, we have a few objectives for today's webinar, again, based on input that we received from the field. And so our goals, our objectives by the end of today's webinar are in a couple ways. One is by the end that each of you will have new knowledge and understanding of the different roles that children may play in bullying behavior, that you each understand ways in which fathers can talk with, this is very important, talk with their children about bullying, understand that their children may have been bullied or may have bullied others. Thirdly, how fatherhood practitioners can address issues related to bullying as a part of parenting education classes. We know that's a major vehicle to communicate new strategies to parents. Fourthly, ways in which fatherhood programs can support anti-bullying and stop bullying initiatives in their local communities. And last but not least, we want to provide helpful resources for fatherhood programs and fathers. Very, very rich agenda outlined ahead of you guys. A few housekeeping notes before we get started, and we're going to dive right in. The audio for today's webinar, for most of you who are already listening, you may already know this, can be heard through your computer speakers. If you're having any difficulty hearing today's webinar, please use the chat box off to the right of the screen. You're going to hear more about that in just a minute. This webinar is being recorded. We know that many of you host these kind of events, like to go back and take notes or hear or listen again to what you've heard. And so we're going to be recording this and then posting it on our website in the next 7 to 9 days for you guys to access and then download and or share with others via your email or your social media networks. I want to talk about submitting questions. We have the benefit and beauty of while the speakers are talking that you guys can, while you have something on your mind, send us a question. And to give a brief overview of how you ask questions, I want to ask Stephanie McNutt to walk us through that process. Stephanie?
Thank you, Patrick. At the bottom of everyone's screen below the slides, you should see a Q&A box. Just feel free to type your question in the question line. Click the little question bubble, and your question will be submitted, and they will address questions at the end. Patrick?
All right. Thanks, Stephanie. As a reminder, the way we're going to facilitate today's webinar is before each presenter presents, I'll introduce them, and then we're going to take questions at the very end. As we just talked about, you can submit your questions during the webinar. At the very end, we're going to try to get as many of those questions that have been asked answered for you guys before we hang up. To our presenters, we have a heavy hitter lineup of presenters who've been doing this work for a number of years, and there are three of them. The first that you will hear from is David Miller. He's a social media manager for the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, but also I'll share with you a little more about his background. Our second presenter is Callahan Walsh, National Outreach and Marketing Coordinator, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And then last but not least, our third presenter is Michael Knowles, Chair, Male Engagement Committee, National Parent Teachers Association. So again, very strong lineup. Before we get started, I want to just talk a little bit about who the Clearinghouse is. I don't want to assume that all of you know who we are. And so the Clearinghouse is a federally funded resource that has been funded by the government to be a one-stop shop for fatherhood practitioners, fathers, programs, grantees, states, and the public at large who are serving and are interested in supporting strong fathers and families. We're led by our director, Mr. Kenneth Braswell, and you'll see on the screen his email address. We always invite folks to email us with either comments or suggested resources. And I manage it as a manager of the project, and so you'll see my email address as well. We are funded again by the Office of Family Assistance, and we have multiple priorities that we try to complete during the course of the year, but also during the course of the project. One of those is to be a resource widespread for fathers, practitioners and programs, policymakers, and researchers. And we do that mainly through our website, fatherhood.gov. We've had the pleasure and benefit of growing our website to a point that we're now getting close to 1 million hits a month. And that's not because of the work that we're doing, it's because of the work that you're doing. And so what we want to do is invite you to continue to check our website. If you visit us and not see things that you think need to be there, we invite you to email us at info@fatherhood.gov on a regular basis. We also have a hotline. Like many of our national partners, we try to make available an online ready resource for fathers, programs, and practitioners to call. And so you'll see the number here to actually receive calls from the community at large regarding either program work or specifically from parents who want to call us. And then last but not least, we're very, very active on social media. And so you can reach us again at fatherhood.gov on Facebook and at fatherhood.gov on Twitter. Our Facebook page now in the last 2 years has grown to a little more than 150,000 followers. And again, not because of what we're doing, but because of what you're doing. And so I want to really continue to encourage you to join us today, but also tomorrow in all those platforms. To our first presenter, I'd like to invite and introduce David Miller, the founder of the Urban Institute, Leadership Institute, which focuses on leadership development to empower youth and adults to create their own enterprises, and through these enterprises, take greater responsibility for their lives and communities. In 2009, he launched the Raising Him Alone campaign. And you can see the website here, www.raisinghimalone.com, an advocacy campaign focused on supporting single mothers and grandmothers who are raising boys. David is also a member of Leap for Ghana, a project focused on building a sustainable and educational infrastructure in rural Ghana, a village in the eastern region of Ghana, West Africa. He's the author of several books, including Lessons I Learned from My Father, a collection of quotes from men of African descent, and most recently, Khalil's Way, which he'll talk about today specifically, which shows boys ways to deal with bullying behavior. A former Baltimore City public school teacher, he has a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Baltimore and a master's degree in education from Goucher College. David resides in Washington, D.C. with his wife, Dr. Carla Taylor and their 3 children. I'd like to introduce David Miller. David, the time is yours.
Good afternoon, and hope all is well. Extremely excited about this afternoon's webinar. I think it's very timely. I think it's extremely timely, and I think it's a discussion centered around the role of fathers. Let me just say very quickly, one of the reasons why I started really doing a great deal of work in the space around bullying is because one day my son brought home an article a couple of years ago about a young man by the name of Carl Walker Hoover. He was an honor roll student, all-around great kid, but because he was being bullied, he decided to take his life. And so I decided that I wanted to write a book which was really dedicated to helping young people really look at this issue of bullying and help young people develop ways that they can kind of talk to their parents, talk to folks at school, and really begin to kind of navigate this really dicey terrain. And so once again, I want to thank everyone, and hopefully this will be a great afternoon. And so in terms of my presentation, we really want to specifically look at the role of fathers and things that dads can do in terms of talking to their children and also helping their children sort of navigate this very difficult terrain as it relates to bullying, and I'm sure my colleagues will build on many of the comments and remarks that I make. And so kids play different roles at different times. They may bully, they may be bullied, they may assist in bullying, they may reinforce it, they may defend, and they also may be a bystander. And we find that a lot of times young people are bystanders because they just don't necessarily know what to do. When we think about a child's perspective on bullying, I had an opportunity to interview over 2,500 middle school students as I developed research for my book. Oftentimes, young people feel a sense of helplessness. They just don't necessarily know what to do. A lot of times they feel very unhappy and apprehensive about going to school. As it relates to warning signs, dads really want dads to start paying attention to the mood and the temperament of their children. Oftentimes, you may just see all of a sudden your son or daughter be withdrawn, not interested in going to school, having some concerns about taking a gym class or staying after school for an after-school program. And many times that may be because the son or daughter is actually being bullied in school. Feelings of just not being good enough, feelings of self-worth, that I'm just not really good enough and that it's okay for people to pick on me. The next one, which is a really big one, is this feelings or notions of not being protected. It is a very paralyzing feeling for a young person to feel unprotected. And so, once again, this webinar is really dedicated toward helping dads kind of notice warning signs as it relates to bullying and really empowering dads. A lot of times, dads are asking, well, what can I actually do if my son or daughter is being bullied? Feelings of blame. A lot of times young children and even older children blame themselves for their problems. I'm being bullied because I'm not a good person, or I'm being bullied because I don't wear the right clothes, or I'm being bullied because I'm just not into the same kinds of things that other young people are into. So this issue of issue of blame as it relates to bullying comes up. Feeling isolated or feeling like I have to deal with this situation alone. We hear this from a lot of young people, that my parents are already busy working 2 and 3 jobs. You know, my dad works really hard. My dad comes home, he's always tired. I don't want to sit down and let my dad know that I'm being bullied or picked on. And so, again, making sure that dads are really tuned in to the needs of their children is really, really critical. Worried that if they do stand up, that they're going to get hurt. I mean, that's a real concern for a lot of young people. If I stand up, if I voice my opinion, if I tell the bully, I'm going to tell my dad, or I'm going to tell the principal at the school. Oftentimes, young people feel as though that they'll be victimized and hurt. And so, again, this notion of having these really important conversations with our children is really, really important. this whole idea of fatherhood programs. We know that there's so many wonderful groups out here doing fatherhood work, and a lot of times that work is focused on whether it's getting a job or going back to school or getting in a trade. This whole notion of communicating with our children is a notion that we really got to underscore, and a notion that we got to talk about a lot more. But what we're asking for is within fatherhood programs to begin to have conversations with dads about bullying and providing the dads in your program with really critical information about bullying. And I think one of the great ways to start is to ask the dads about their own experiences growing up. Most people, even the biggest guy, even the guy who may have played football, even the real macho guy, most young men have been bullied at some point in their lives, whether it's on the playground, when they were in grade school, or even in the locker room when they played a sport. And so really being able to get the dads in your group to talk about their own experiences about being bullied and how they actually dealt with their bullying when they were younger. Talk about the different roles kids play in bullying, particularly as it relates to bystanders. Again, a lot of young people end up being bystanders because, number one, they don't know what to do, and number two, they feel like if I don't say anything, then I won't be a victim, as long as it is somebody else. And so, again, it's critically important to be able to provide dads in your program with this information so that they can begin to talk to their children. We also are looking for dads and program managers and facilitators to begin to help increase the awareness of kids' behavior as it relates to bullying. Oftentimes there's a great deal of shame. Many times children feel withdrawn. They feel isolated. And so beginning to make sure that dads are very aware of how challenging this issue of bullying is. A few days ago, another 12-year-old young man in Florida just took his life as a result of bullying. So we know that these issues are real. We know that these issues are very timely. And so we always want to emphasize the role of parents, and specifically fathers, in modeling certain behaviors. Begin to think about how you interact with people in a day-to-day basis. It could be as simple as, you're driving down the street and a little old lady almost cuts you off at the traffic light, and you decide to pull up next to her, and you really start harassing her. You're honking a horn, you're yelling at her. And so realize that your children are in the backseat of the car. And so modeling appropriate behavior is really, really critical. A lot of children learn bullying behavior from things that they see their parents do. And so for the dads, be very careful about the way that you talk to your wife or your girlfriend. Be very careful about your interactions, because your children are often watching you, and they model that behavior. Discuss ways that you can talk with your children about bullying. And again, I think it's really important to make sure we disseminate this information in our respective fatherhood programs. How do we help kids who are being bullied? Really important that we begin to think about strategies, thinking about very important strategies, modeling strategies, communication strategies. How do we begin to help kids who already feel isolated and don't really feel good about themselves? Recognize and talk to kids who may be bullying. A lot of times we focus a lot of our energy on the children that are being bullied, but what about the bully? The bully needs love too. The bully needs positive information too. The child is actually involved in the bullying needs to know that this behavior is wrong and this behavior is unacceptable. And then general conversations with our children about school, and definitely upholding this idea that being a bystander is wrong. And even being a bystander, there are things that you can do. We encourage, even for the bystanders, dads, make sure you explain to your son or daughter what a bystander is, and how being a bystander is not the best strategy for addressing the bullying, being a bystander, literally, you become part of the bullying by not saying anything, by not voicing your opinion, by not, writing down on a sheet of paper and giving it to another teacher that Michael in the 4th grade is bullying this child in our class. I mean, these are some things that are really important. And so just some tips from the Robert F. Kennedy Bullying Center. Emphasizing kindness on a day-to-day is really critical. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a very difficult world, and our children oftentimes are byproducts of witnessing a lot of violence on television, seeing a lot of violence on social media, seeing violence at home. So as a dad, one of the most important things that I think that we can uplift is this notion of kindness and trying to be respectful to your friends, and doing kind things for your classmates and other children that you may interact with on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes understanding that even with your best intentions, some children are just going to be mean, and so being able to practice and exercise forgiveness, and then learning how to ignore people. Even if you're in a class at school and you have children in the class that are very mean, and you have to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. But this whole notion of kindness, but also forgiveness is really important. Expand your children's circle of concern and capacity for caring. Again, uplifting this whole idea around empathy is really important. Modeling the kind of behavior you want your children to display. I don't think that we can overemphasize that enough. Often children learn the bullying and the violent behavior and the disrespect and the cruelty. I'm sad to say they're learning it from their parents. And so, dads, I think we play a major role in displaying appropriate behavior and also managing our anger, helping our sons and daughters understand that anger is a normal, natural part of our emotions, but how you exercise your anger is, I think, what we really need to talk about. Getting feedback from your peers about your parenting and your parenting styles. Being able to ask your wife or your girlfriend, was I a little too harsh with Michael yesterday? Was I appropriate in the way that I disciplined or the language that I used? And so being able to get that kind of ongoing feedback from other adults in your life can be really, really important. I'm going to talk a little bit about technology, but one or two of our other presenters are going to delve into this body of this particular webinar in greater detail. I'm the social media manager for the Clearinghouse, and so I spend a tremendous amount of time using our social media platforms as well as searching for content for our social media platforms. And so I'm here to tell you, dads, there are some websites and some folks out here that are sending out some very negative and derogatory messages for our children. And so it's really important that you check your privacy settings as it relates to the internet, as well as Facebook and other social media platforms, that we set those privacy levels at the strictest levels, because sometimes our children, in their angst to find stuff on social media, find stuff that's inappropriate. Create some ground rules. If your kids are old enough to be on the computer, there needs to be some ground rules in your house. And for me, my oldest daughter is 18 years old, and she is a college student, but we still have some ground rules, because as long as you live, in my house or you're under my wing, I am your dad, and so there's got to be some ground rules. Keep the computer in a central place in the home. Ladies and gentlemen, too often children are able to go into their rooms, lock the door with the laptop, with the Kindle, with the computer, and so always make sure that the computer is in a central place where you can just walk over, look over your child's shoulder, and you can get a better understanding of what they're doing. We definitely have to talk to young people about the dangers of being online. While being online and the internet can be a beautiful thing, there's some dangers. There's a most recent case in the state of Maryland where a middle school age girl was having conversations with adult men. She was kidnapped, and so by this man, prayerfully they were able to get her back to safety. But this whole notion of having conversations with our children about the dangers of being online are really important. And so we can't talk about that enough, and one of our other presenters will provide greater detail. But let's really kind of jump back into talking with our children, because I think it's really important to tell children that they're not responsible for the bully's behavior. When my oldest daughter was being bullied, it really affected her deeply, and I had to make her understand that it's not you. It's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you, and that sometimes the best thing to do is to walk away. And I think that was real difficult for my daughter because she wanted to be popular. She wanted to be part of the in crowd. But helping her understand that our number one goal is her safety and her security. And so that we instructed her one of the best things to do is to walk away and avoid the bully at all costs. I mean, if you're in the gym and you know the bully is in your gym class, not only try to avoid the bully, but also talk with other young people who might be in that gym class and kind of let them know, can you walk with me to the bathroom? Or I gotta go change in the locker room. Do you mind walking with me? Because that little girl over there is going to follow me. She's going to torment me. And so, again, these are the kinds of courageous conversations, courageous and ongoing conversations that our children have to have with adults, have to have with parents. And dads, I think it's really important that we begin to take a leadership role in having these conversations with our children. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm real big on school visits. I have 3 children, and all 3 of my children know I am the dad that will just show up. Sometimes it's just a matter of working it out with your employer, letting your employer know that you need to visit your child's school. So really important to visit your child's school. Be proactive versus dealing on the emotional side, just waiting for a teacher to call you to tell you that there is a problem. What we have found is that just having dad's presence in the building sends a clear message to other children that with this particular child, dad is involved. And so we think that that's really important. Meeting with the teacher, having an ongoing active relationship with your son or daughter's teacher is really important. Always figuring out what is the best way for the teacher to communicate with you as a dad. It could be text messaging. It could be Twitter. It could be Facebook. It could be old-fashioned pick up the phone and call, email, whatever's the best way. You really want to kind of iron that out. Very, very important. Always keep notes of your meetings with teachers, particularly in incidents of bullying. You definitely want to be able to document. Documentation is key. You want to be able to document the visits to the school. I've talked to dads in the past, and I've asked them, well, how many times have you gone to the school? And they can't remember. They can't remember what action was taken on by school. Most people nowadays have a smartphone. So even if you jot down on 12/9, at 3 o'clock, I went to the school. I met with Ms. Johnson, who is the behavioral interventionist at the school, and we had a conversation because my child is being bullied. Make sure that we document that stuff is really important. But dads in the building, dads play a major role in the building. Having dads more visible in the building is critically important. And so my contact information is on the last slide, email address and Twitter, and then some of the publications, just a few of the publications that I've written. But our most recent book is called Khalil's Way. It's the story of an 11-year-old boy who can do college-level math. He is extremely smart, grew up in New Orleans post-Katrina, growing up in New Orleans post-Katrina, but he's being bullied because he is smart. And so really great read for anyone who is working with young people. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Patrick.
Thank you, David. We had a number of high points that you mentioned that I have several questions that I either have written down or were submitted. So I just want to thank you for that presentation. So we're going to definitely come back to you at the very end. So again, thanks for that strong presentation. Our next presenter is Callahan Walsh. Callahan is a National Outreach and Marketing Coordinator at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. In addition to promoting the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's prevention programs, Callahan is responsible for coordinating Take 25, a child safety prevention campaign created in honor of National Missing Children's Day. Callahan is the son of John and Reeve Walsh, who founded the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children after the kidnapping and murder of their first son, Adam. Prior to working at the National Center, Callahan served as the production manager and supervising producer for his father's long-running television show, America's Most Wanted, and his new show, The Hunt, with John Walsh on CNN. Following in his parents' footsteps, Callahan has focused his energy on helping find missing children, reducing child sexual exploitation, and preventing child victimization. Please join me in welcoming Callahan Walsh. Callahan, the time is yours.
Great, thank you, Patrick, and thank you, David, very much for that great presentation. You really hit on some great points there. I will be talking mostly about the subject of cyberbullying, and although some of our points will overlap, cyberbullying does differ quite a bit in a few different areas. So, today, like I said, I'd like to address you about the issues around cyberbullying, give you its definition if you're unaware, some examples of cyberbullying, cyberbullying's major players, and what you can do as a parent and as a father to help address some of these issues. Also go over some of the prevention programs, some of the resources that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I know that's kind of a mouthful. If you hear me refer to it as the center, or you may hear me refer to it as NCMEC for the rest of the presentation. But we'll be going over some of the resources that NCMEC has to offer to parents and kids to help teach them how to deal with cyberbullying, and some of the other prevention resources, namely the Net Smarts workshop. So you may be wondering, what is cyberbullying? And it's pretty simple. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is bullying through technology, things like cell phones, social media sites, and online games. However, the difference between being bullied at school and being bullied online is that the kids online cannot get away from it. It follows them once they go home. And unfortunately, cyberbullying, like I said, follows them when they get home from school. They really just can't get away from it. Research does show that the problem of online harassment of minors is relatively widespread, with a range of anywhere from 4 to 46% of youth reporting that they're being cyberbullied. So as you can see from those numbers, it is reported as a pretty prevalent a problem in today's youth. Girls are also more likely to be targeted, unfortunately, and youth who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or questioning are also more likely to be involved. And surprisingly, it can be both as someone who is being bullied and someone who's also doing the bullying. Some of the examples of cyberbullying, it can happen in many different ways. Technology like cell phones and social media sites let children spread rumors and make these nasty comments about each other with as simple as a mouse click. So if you're unfamiliar with some of what the examples of cyberbullying are, they include sending mean text messages, creating a fake profile to post embarrassing information or images, spreading rumors and gossip online, altering pictures to embarrass someone, or even just sending threatening or harassing comments. When a child is being bullied online, unfortunately, they can be humiliated really in front of a worldwide audience. There's really no way to control how quickly and how far the information spreads. We call this information acceleration. And because of these factors, cyberbullying really can differ from regular bullying in a number of ways. For example, it often spreads faster than in-person bullying because of the instant online communication. It definitely has a wider audience because it can be easily sent to potentially limitless, unlimited amount of people. And it follows children home from school, like I had said before. So they really, they can't get away from it. They see it on, they turn their computer on and it's there. They turn their phone on and it's there. We've talked about some of the cyberbullying, in the news related to suicides. Oftentimes you see these highly publicized teen suicides like these two. Unfortunately, These were both two teenage boys who were bullied and experienced a lot of harassment and later committed suicide. Research does show that these cyberbullying-related suicides, there's usually a few more factors at play. That most teens who committed suicide were bullied both in school and online, and that most importantly, many of the teens had some type of other mental illness going on, something like depression. So you really have to understand that, although cyberbullying can be extremely devastating for its victims, and most teens will not commit suicide solely as a result, but it sometimes does happen, but when it does, there usually are other factors at play. It's just something to keep in mind. To prepare your children, to teach your children how to be better digital citizens, you really need to understand who the major players are involved in the bullying. And there's three major players. Those who instigate the bullying, or someone who joins in the bullying, who are often referred to as the cyberbullies. Those who are bullied, oftentimes online and offline, who are often identified as the victim. And finally, the bystanders, those who stand by and watch the cyberbullying happen, but unfortunately do nothing about it. And just keep in mind that some of the cases you'll see, the ones who are doing the bullying, sometimes are being bullied themselves. The situations can be very complicated. There's not always an easy solution. If a 15-year-old boy receives a mean text message and fires back in retaliation, exhibiting aggressive behavior, that could be viewed as bullying as well. So, once the victim, now the bully, and like I said, it can be, oftentimes a very sort of complicated scenario. So there are a few things to look for if you think your child might be cyberbullied. Cyberbullying can be so far-reaching that it really does greatly impact its victim. There are quite a few things to look for if you think your child may be a victim of cyberbullying, and those include suddenly stop using the computer or cell phone, perhaps acting nervous when receiving email, instant message, or text message, seeming uneasy about going to school or withdrawing from friends and family. And if you do see any of these signs, please don't ignore them. Children who have been cyberbullied need to feel that you as a parent are really taking this problem seriously, and that you will do everything that you can to help them. That really goes a long way in the mind of a victim. So, what happens if you do find out that your son or daughter is being cyberbullied? There are a few ways you can help, as David mentioned a few earlier. Number one, save the evidence, document it. Take screenshots, print out any of the messages. If there was ever an investigation, either by law enforcement or by the school or what have you, you will need proof of what was posted. So you can take screenshots or save any of that evidence. Really helps in the long run. You can try to block cyberbullies. Tell your children not to respond to the message, and use websites that have features that allow you to block specific users. You can set up new accounts. This includes email, instant messaging, social media sites, and cell phone numbers, and make sure that your children are only giving the new information to the friends that they trust. You can even go to the school. Go and talk to the school. Usually cyberbullying involves in-person bullying as well, usually by someone your child knows, like a classmate. So talk to the teachers, talk to the administrators, and try to work together to address bullying in the school. There's oftentimes already a policy in place by the school, so go ahead and talk to them about resolving the situation. You can also report it to the website or app where the cyberbullying is taking place. A lot of these websites or apps have reporting features. You might be also able to report the unwanted text messages to your cell phone provider, and in many cases block certain numbers, so that can be a tool as well. And if you feel that any laws have ever been broken or your child is being threatened, then you can always contact the police for help. And again, documenting that evidence is key if that's the outcome. So when it comes to children, on the flip side, who are doing the bullying, the parents are often in the dark, unfortunately. Parents don't usually find out that their children are involved in this type of behavior until they hear about it from either another parent or from the school. So be proactive and look for the signs. Your children may be involved with cyberbullying if they Quickly switch screens or close programs when you walk by. Use the computer at all hours of the night. Get unusually upset if they cannot use the computer. Laugh excessively while online. Avoid discussions about what they're doing. Use multiple online accounts or use an account that is not their own. These behaviors are not indicative. I mean, it's not if your child, you see your child doing one of these things doesn't automatically, of course, mean that they're a cyberbully. Many teenagers do, some of these activities without cyberbullying others. But be curious. You see these things going on, take a look. Go ahead, go walk over, ask them what they're doing. You are the parent. You need to set ground rules. Ask them to show you what they're doing and see if everything is all right. If you do discover that your child is engaging in this type of behavior, there are a few things as well that you can help prevent your child from cyberbullying others in the future. And first is establishing expectations for online behavior. It's pretty simple. Make sure that your child knows that bullying and cyberbullying are just frankly unacceptable. And set consequences for cyberbullying. This varies from family to family, but can include perhaps losing the internet privileges or more supervised internet usage. Lastly, and most importantly, and Dave talked about this, is model good behavior yourself. Children learn from the adults around them, so you yourself should always be respectful to others online. And I think that that road rage example was perfect. If you're stuck in traffic and you're yelling at the car in front of you, of course your children are gonna model that type of behavior. So lead by example, and that's what we suggest with cyberbullying as well. Of course, you don't have to tell your children that they have to be friends with everyone, but you should teach them about respecting others. If you find that your child may be already involved in the cyberbullying, be open to working with the school as well to correct the problem. And so the third player, and again, David talked about how important it is the bystanders, and teaching bystanders that their role is very important. And in fact, most kids actually fall into this category, into the bystander category. And unfortunately, the bystanders are often afraid to speak up about the cyberbullying. They're afraid of being targeted next or being called a tattletale. However, the information from these bystanders is critical if teachers and other trusted adults are to take action. So talk to your child, not about just being a bystander. And you can do this in a couple ways. You can do this by establishing expectations for reporting. Teach them to speak up when they see cyberbullying happen. And encourage them to stand up for the victim only when they feel it's safe to do so. That might mean being a good friend to the victim, telling the bully to stop, or even refusing to join in the cyberbullying as well. And teach them to report the cyberbullying. Bystanders will feel better about reporting if they're reassured that they're doing the right thing. And honestly, sometimes just being a good friend is the best thing a bystander can do. With positive comments or kind text messages, or even just sitting with the victim at lunch, that sort of stuff can actually really go a long way. So, at NICMIC, we believe that the lessons about respecting others online and building, digital citizenship is really taught at an early age, which is why our programs like NetSmarts feature resources for children ages 5 to 17. We use 3D animated, like Pixar, style graphics on many of our videos for the younger kids. We use 2D, sort of like comic book style animation for some of the teens and tweens. And then for the older kids, which is sometimes the hardest for them to listen, we use videos that we create called real-life stories. Those are voiced by the victims in the victim's own voice, written by the victim, and can often be much more impactful when it's coming from a peer instead of an adult sort of preaching or lecturing to them. We've got quite a different videos. I've listed some specifically by name here. For elementary age students, we have videos like Bad Netiquette Stinks, which teaches young children how to deal with cyberbullies and the importance of using good netiquette. For the intermediate to middle school age kids, we have videos like Terrible Text and Attitude Overdrive. Attitude Overdrive is great. It illustrates how cyberbullying can become a problem when playing online games as well. And for the older kids from middle and high school, we have videos like You Can't Take It Back and Broken Friendship, which is about a girl who's humiliated when someone she thought was her friend, sends embarrassing messages and pictures. So I'll talk to you about where you can find some of those very shortly. It's everything can be found at netsmarts.org, and it's all there for free. I'll list some of the links at the very end. But NetSmarts does really focus on a few key lessons for several different reasons. But we believe installing empathy first and foremost. Try discussing with your kids how cyberbullying may make the victim feel. Emphasize that although they can't see their reactions, that people online are real people with real feelings and real emotions. And they may not always get along with their peers, but again, they should respect each other. You should also tell children that cyberbullying has consequences. If your school has a bullying policy, discuss it with your students and remind them that cyberbullying can get them into trouble, not only in school, but in some extreme cases with the police as well. And when you address those who have been bullied, lessons should focus on encouragement and empowerment, and let your kids know that the victims of cyberbullying really aren't helpless. And lastly, encourage your children to respect each other online and to take action when they see cyberbullying. That's vital to keeping the internet bully free. So again, sort of to let you know where you can find some of these resources. This is my contact and info and resource page. If you have any other questions or want to discuss anything offline, you can always send me an email there at cwalsh@nicmic.org. The first link is the website from the main website from National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The resources that I was mentioning are from the NetSmarts program. There's some links there. All of the resources are downloadable. We have them oftentimes in many other languages. They're all free. And not only do we have the videos, but we have activity sheets that reinforce the messages that are taught in the videos. We have full presentations that come complete with speaker's notes so that you can take some of these issues into your neighborhood, into your community. And then on social media, as Patrick mentioned, I am involved in the Take 25 program here at the National Center, and that's some of our social media handles there. You can follow us on Twitter at Take 25 and Facebook Take 25 campaign. We're always posting safety tips, age-appropriate discussion guides, and other resources created here at the center. So again, thank you all for your time and allowing me to address the issues of cyberbullying. Patrick, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Callahan. This is great information. We've had two strong, content-rich presentations. Interestingly enough, I was taking some notes, and both were, there's several things that were shared in both presentations, so there's some common points as well. So I'm very excited. There were a couple questions that came in for you. I took down a couple as well, so we'll be asking those questions at the very end.
I think David and I had a few points, but overlapped on a few points, but I think that's good. I think we're all on the same page.
That's really good. Really good. So thanks again, Callahan. Our last presenter, last but not least, is Michael Knowles. Michael is chair of the Male Engagement Committee for the National Parent Teachers Association, otherwise known as PTA. Besides his work with the National PTA, Michael is a consultant to several national and community organizations dealing with the engagement and development of fathers and families. He has assisted in the development of international educational, social service, and corporate initiatives related to client, membership, and volunteer development for several national and international entities, including the National Football League, NFL, otherwise known, General Motors, and the YMCA. As a YMCA Executive Director on Chicago's South Side, Michael managed youth and family enhancement programs, child care, transitional, senior housing, and anti-drug and anti-violence campaigns. As a community leader, he championed community awareness efforts relating to male engagement, employment, health, education, and affordable housing. He has developed and implemented cultural awareness and character development programs in the Los Angeles, Cleveland, Detroit, Miami, and Oakland public schools, and has overseen international student exchange and leadership programs in 25 countries. Michael's lifelong philosophy is that all children in the village are mine. He attended LaSalle University and Morehouse College. Please join me in welcoming Michael Knowles. Michael, the time is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to the Clearinghouse for inviting PTA, and I certainly am honored to be on a panel with such distinguished speakers and experts. Really, I just want to say that my love for father engagement, or really my interest in male engagement, started when I was asked by the Department of Children and Family Services in Illinois and the Chicago Urban League to start a program to work with children primarily who were in the foster care system, least likely to be adopted, but were predominantly males, were predominantly children of color. But the idea was that we to get them involved with men or male role models, or even fathers, which is what we do. We work with about 400 kids, and certainly kids in foster care are among the most bullied, and are certainly among the ranks of the bullies. So I just wanted to say that this is really quite an honor. What we'll do real briefly is we're going to share really some PTA programs and some PTA tools that we think may be helpful. We know that you've heard some great information on bullying and some definitions on bullying, but we want to talk a little bit about how we get fathers engaged. Let me first say that PTA has a long background of being involved. Really, PTA was founded in 1897 and really still remains the oldest and largest volunteer child advocacy organization in the nation. And today's PTA is a network of about millions of families, students, teachers, administrators, nearly 4.2 million members. And really, business and community leaders are also involved, but they're all devoted to the educational success of children and really the promotion of family engagement. In the slide that's in front of you, you see our current president, Otha Thornton. Otha is the second male president of PTA in 18 years. And he also is the first African-American male. And really, our national presidents are very key to our development of male engagement. Really, about 7 or 8 years ago, PTA's male membership was about 7%. And our national president at the time was a gentleman by the name of Chuck Saylor, who also was having discussions with our former president, decided that we needed to become more engaged with fathers. The idea is that we saw the research. You guys have seen all the research that when kids are engaged, better grades, certainly, better social behaviors, which we'll continue to talk about here. But out of that came an initiative that's grown PTA's membership from a male membership from 7% to actually 22% current day. And that represents hundreds of thousands of men who have now become engaged through PTA programming. Let me tell you a little bit about the work that I'm doing. The National PTA Male Engagement Committee was actually started out of our membership committee. This committee primarily works with PTAs to develop male engagement programming. A big part of their job is to strengthen male involvement in PTA and also manage something that we call the MORE Alliance, which is Men Organized to Raise Engagement. We actually work closely with a number of organizations in the development of programming and outreach. Our current members are Watchdogs. I don't know if many of you may already be familiar with Watchdogs, but Watchdogs actually brings dads into the classroom for a day. The idea is to bring those dads into that environment. They get an opportunity to interact with the teachers, interact with kids, actually work with kids even on curriculum. They get an opportunity to see the teachers' behavioral plans and style and support those once those kids leave the schoolyard. So it's a very Watchdogs are currently in more than 4,000 schools across the country. A great program. Those dads come to those schools, right, and they see those teachers working. The first thing out of their mouth is, man, those teachers need a raise. But they also go home with this great understanding of the challenges of the school, including bullying. And also, I was telling someone earlier, one of our fathers in our Watchdogs program, which also is a program of the National Center for Fathering. One of our dads came out of that. He said he went to school. He had lunch with his 6th grade daughter and her friends, and watched them interact, and also watched them the way that they interacted with their peers, but also watching them with their devices and how they were talking to other kids on those devices. And he went home and was able to go home and said, man, we need to have a discussion about how you interact. And I think that's That's a very important piece, actually having those dads involved. All Pro Dad was a program started by Tony Dungy. If many of you may know Coach Dungy, the former Super Bowl championship coach. That program has dad and child breakfasts and dad and child events that are really to engage dads, again, at the school, primarily so dads, again, begin to understand the school climate. But also, when dads are present and when they're present at the school, the kids begin to understand how important education is, and also begin to understand how important their behavior is. And many of you can sit there and attest to the fact that when fathers are around, behavior changes, whether that's at school or at home, but certainly at school. And these dads are very, very strong role models. Strong Fathers, Strong Families is a program which has father and child math nights, father and child science nights, and other types of father and son curricular activities. And so it's a great program ran by actually Dr. Michael Hall out of Dallas, Texas. So a great program. You can reach our PTA More program at the PTA More at the www.pta.org More website. Really, in all of our programs, we certainly encourage PTA fathers to not only to look out for their child, but to look out for all the children at their school and in their community. So dads begin to, when they're engaged in these programs, they do begin to go home and start to recognize what's going on in their community, other kids in their community. They begin to know about other kids in their community, which is very important, I think, in terms of being a role model. I also wanted to score that the work that we do here in our programming is not is very inclusive of women and of mothers. I just want to say, moms have been doing this for like 117 years in the PTA, and dads are only the enhancement to what moms have been doing. So we don't discount moms. We don't even though we have male engagement programs, we invite moms to certainly participate. We think they're a very key part, and we work in tandem with our mothers. Let me tell you a little bit in regards to bullying and programs. PTA certainly has created a program called Connect for Respect, which is it's kind of been overhauled over the last few years. This program has really gone through this huge rejuvenation and to incorporate some of the most up-to-date research and some of the best practices in its approach. With the Connect for Respect program, there are program leader guides, tools and templates, and additional resources, and all are available for free in our online toolkit, again, at pta.org with C4R. And C4R is the sort of the acronym that we use to talk a little bit about this program. When National PTA revised the Connect for Respect program, they wade through a lot of the best practices and evidence-based approaches to find out what the research supported and what would actually work for PTAs to implement. Over and over, the findings indicated that addressing bullying through overall school climate improvement was the most effective strategy. School climate is defined as the quality and character of school life by the National School Climate Council. School climate includes a multitude of different factors that create the entire experience of a school, as illustrated in the graphic. Over the last 30 years, there have been a growing body of research to show how school climate is associated with academic achievement, as well as effective risk prevention, graduation rates, and teacher retention. In fact, research shows when bullying is a part of the school climate, students do not feel emotionally or socially safe, and they may not feel physically safe. This kind of negative climate may impede the academic achievement of students, and the good news is that the research also showed that bullying could be decreased and prevented by reinforcing a positive school climate. And there's some even better news. Strong family-school partnerships with your PTAs or with your parent organizations are really a key component to positive school climates. Individual incidents of bullying are still an important thing to discuss with your child directly, and you heard that a little bit from some of our previous speakers. Certainly those conversations with your kids as you are observing their behavior are very important. But parent groups can affect change also by helping to strengthen the entire school culture and helping with respect and tolerance. The idea of supporting sort of what we call big picture changes through partnerships between schools and families is really clearly represented in the national PTA standards. So let me share those standards with you. National PTA developed these standards several years ago based on research that shows when families, schools, and community members work together, students are more successful. Families are more equipped to support their learning, social and emotional development, and teachers feel more supported. Now, every program that National PTA designs keeps these standards in mind. So let me tell you a little bit about how they apply. You see standard number 1 and standard number 2 there. These welcoming families into the school community and communicating effectively are really the foundations of mutual respect among the schools and the PTAs and the families that you may represent. This is how you first connect and sustain strong relationships that are focused on the needs of students above all else. When we say welcoming families, we mean everyone, and that includes fathers and male figures. I mean, I've actually had fathers who say, I've gone to schools and, sometimes I feel invisible because they talk to the mom or they don't necessarily recognize fathers. We've got some cultural things that we certainly have to work through. But I always tell the fathers that we work with, you are as a parent, you're really the first teacher. And really the idea that schools should be welcoming you and that you are a part of a partnership. I think fathers need to understand that they are a big part of raising their kids and helping their kids with education, and they shouldn't step down from becoming engaged. So helping schools become more welcoming of fathers, I think, is very important. Consider the issue of bullying, like supporting student success. It really means creating a learning environment where students have an equal opportunity to excel without fear or without humiliation. School staff collaborate with families to nurture social and emotional development. Positive role models, in particular, can help support student behavioral health, which is why it is so important to have fathers engaged in this initiative. Speaking up for every child it really means finding the most effective way to prevent bullying, protecting all students involved. That includes the students who bully, as we've heard earlier. And when you speak up for every child, you question what is causing that behavior, what is needed to stop it from happening in the future. Sharing power translates to engaging a range of stakeholders in a discussion around the school climate and prevention of bullying. Stakeholders have equal power, again, in the dialogue and the action planning. Connect to Respect, this program, emphasizes the importance of sharing power, not only among adults, but also with the students, which is a very key fact. Fathers are also an important stakeholder in this effort. The more diverse perspectives, the better is how we look at that. Finally, you see standard number 6, collaborating with community. It really speaks to the reality that bullying is a behavior that does not occur in a school building alone. As you've heard, it happens in other places where students interact, learn, and connect. And we've heard that about online and certainly offline. If your school and PTA are addressing this problem together, you should consider what other community organizations that are prevalent in your student life, whether they're involved in sports, whether they're involved in faith-based activities, in libraries, organizations, or nearby businesses. You need to think about all of those because you may want them to be a part of the solution because they too witness the problem. And this is also relevant to the role of fathers because prevention efforts extend beyond the school campus. There are many ways to get involved that you may not automatically associate with bullying prevention. Volunteering with the school's soccer team may be a great opportunity to model positive behaviors and really to intervene in any bullying issues. So any of the activities that you may have around your school, whether they're sports, whether they're the chess club, it doesn't really matter, but those are all opportunities for you to be observant. Let's talk a little bit about our approach. Connect for Respect really has 5 main steps. First, you will build a team, a Connect for Respect team. Second, the Connect for Respect team, or the C4R team for short, will assess the school climate. Third, the C4R team will engage the school community at a Connect for Respect forum. And at these forums, the school community will develop an action plan. I think that's a very important piece. Throughout the school year, your Connect for Respect team will chip away at this plan in empowering students, family members, school staff, and community members to take the step that will improve the school climate and prevent bullying. Let's talk a little bit about male engagement and the Connect for Respect. Really, you don't have to be a PTA member. Fathers can still partner with PTAs to join some of these Connect for Respect teams that we just talked about. So here's an opportunity for fathers to be involved in your school. Fathers really can mentor student leaders and help student leaders to take a stand against bullying. Again, volunteering, we talked a little bit about some of the programs in our MORE Alliance, but volunteering to supervise areas around the school where bullying hotspots or places in the school where you might assume bullying may start. It may be in cafeteria, it may be in the cafeteria, it may be at bus stops, but having fathers around, I think is so key. We certainly have heard this from so many of our participants. When those dads are around, the disruptive behavior drops dramatically. We hear that from principals all the time. But again, we talked a little bit about just dads being there, being present, not just for your own child, but for other child, but being there for students who may be bullied and may be acting out for others. Dads can be very sensitive to that. We've had a number of dads who have said, I've been able to talk with other kids who have been going through some rough times because they've had bad interactions with other classmates. We talked a little bit about some of the cyberbullying that has gone on. I'll talk a little bit more here. But first of all, let me say, fathers can really, we do want fathers to get involved. This came up a little bit in the discussion. If your school doesn't have a PTA, or, or if your school doesn't have a male engagement program, we always say the principal is really a good tack and really an important contact. Any program you start, if you don't have the principal's approval, or if you don't have the principal on board, then you might run into some situations. We always tell people, step number one is go find a principal. If your school doesn't have a PTA, we'll talk to the principal about that. If your school doesn't have if your school has a PTA and your PTA doesn't necessarily have a male engagement program, we certainly want you to have a discussion with them and with your PTA. I mean, don't hesitate. Really, I mean, again, not all schools have PTA, but if you're interested in PTA, you can certainly go to the PTA website to find out more about how to create a PTA. And join a PTA. Now, again, let's go back a little bit. A little bit with the Share Awesome program. We all know that bullying can extend to those digital environments, and it may be tricky to navigate conversations with your child about online interactions. You've heard some of that today. But National PTA's new digital citizenship campaign is called Share Awesome. It offers some solutions to those concerns. Through the Share Awesome National PTA and our sponsor, LifeLock, we provide families ways to create open and evolving conversations about safe, positive decisions and using the use of digital tools. So really at www.shareawesomenow.org, socializing, you'll find some great tips for striking up conversations with your child about keeping online interactions safe and positive, as well as some other hints on becoming digital citizens. There's a few things that are coming soon at PTA. Really, in February, the Male Engagement Committee will be putting out a Male Engagement Toolkit. That toolkit will be out at the end of February. It's well on its way, but it's going to allow you to go in and see how do I develop a male engagement program at my school or in my environment. It'll have some best practices from across the country for both PTAs and other parent organizations. It will certainly it would help you learn how to even create a PTA or male-centered PTA. We actually do have father-centered PTAs in a number of locations, sort of non-traditional. There's a Detroit Fathers PTA. There's even a PTA in a barbershop in Baltimore, Maryland. So PTAs are everywhere, and wherever fathers can get engaged. I think one of the things we always want to say that it's if you go to your state PTA, it's quite possible they can help you begin your PTA or begin your parent organization under their 501c3. So you don't necessarily have to apply for your own nonprofit status if you're starting a program of that type, but you can also go to your state PTA. There are more resources on the More Alliance available at that website. How do you contact those great organizations that are out there doing it? You really go to the PTA more. And then there'll be more resources related to certainly to bullying on our C4R website, pta.org/C4R, as they become available. And there's some of our if you got some feedback, there's my contact information regarding male engagement and also some of the other programming. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Pat. Patrick?
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Michael. Wow. I think we've had 3 strong perspectives, 3 strong presentations, and so I want to dive right in to the questions before we wrap up. Try to catch as many of it as I can. One of the first questions that we received was around something you said, Cal. You mentioned the 3 people involved in the bullying process: the investigator, the bullied/victim, and the bystanders. One of the questions is, where do you start when you know all 3 of those participants? Where do you start to address this to start out?
That's tough. It's sort of chicken or the egg. It's case by case. I think you understand what's going on and what you feel is right. Oftentimes talking to the cyberbully and making sure that he knows or she knows what their actions are causing is a good way to sort of nip it at the bud. Talking to the victim and making sure that they're all right, that they're still in a good place, and then perhaps addressing the other students that you might see that are doing the bystanding. I think I would hit the go after the one who's doing the bullying first, or that it seems where which is who's doing the most prevalent bullying first. Address the victim, make sure that they're okay, and then if you really think that the bystander issue is becoming a problem, address the bystanders. It's just often that the bystanders are overlooked and not really even thought of as a component, and really they can be a key to helping sort of change the whole atmosphere, whether that's in that classroom or within a group of peers or what have you. So like I said, it's sort of, to narrow it down, it's sort of case by case, but I sort of would tackle in that order: cyberbully, victim, and then bystanders.
Okay, excellent. David, there was a question you mentioned, and I can gauge a little bit by the technology, kind of engagement by participants, and there was high engagement as you were talking around ground rules for your children. So can you say a little bit more about ground rules around social media engagement, and kind of what kinds of things do you put in place in a set of ground rules for your kids who are using computers or things like that?
Yeah, I just think that that's such a powerful question. Number one, most national experts would tell you you cannot leave children in their rooms or teenagers left up to their own vices. You got to make sure, and I know, a lot of times we're into letting our children be individuals and let them have autonomy. If you're living in my house, you don't have a whole lot of autonomy, right? Because I need to see what's going on in the computer. And so, again, imagine a 16-year-old whose parents allow him to lock his or her door, go into the room, and have free reign of social media and the internet, and never even go on the computer to kind of check on the child's history. So my son is 15, and we just had this conversation the other day. We periodically check the history, to check the websites that he's looking at. There's certain, policy, not policy, but the settings. Looking at the settings on your computer, you can ban certain words, like if certain words come up. But it's just, part of it is, we're just saying to dads, we just need to increase this level of involvement, because social media, internet has become a game changer. And a lot of times dads are saying, well, I'm not even on Facebook. Well, I'm not. Well, if your child is on Facebook, you should automatically set up a Facebook account so you can then periodically peruse your son or daughter's Facebook page. But I think it begins and ends with increasing engagement, communication, and learning about the technology that this generation is using.
Yep. You answered two questions at once because Tiffany Smith submitted a question. She asked basically on whatever platform your kids are on, should the parents be on? I think you just addressed that question. Yeah,
you are doing yourself a disservice if you're not on the same platform that your children are on.
Okay. Were you saying something, Cal, as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that. I mean, that's not only should you be on those sites, but you should make sure that when you send your child that friend request that they're accepting. A lot of times, and if you just jump on there, oh, I have Facebook, the parents might not know that if you guys aren't friends on Facebook, that you don't have access to their full profile to see their pictures and things like that. So, not only to get on those social media sites, but just be savvy, understand how they operate as well.
Excellent. Michael, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm okay. I think those are great answers.
All right. The last question I think I have time to ask is really when you think about parents, and again, I like the way that Cal, I think David said the same thing about the 3 participants and some of these bullying instances. What have you seen that's worked, particularly from fathers, that has worked with parents whose children are the person who's actually doing the bullying, Michael? What have you seen that has worked when you have a dad whose son or daughter is actually the bully? What have you seen that's worked to bring that to their attention to make some changes?
Well, certainly one of the things we've always talked about is you can't communicate enough, right? I think certainly when you get into bullying situations, whether it's your child or the child or another person's child, you've got to step up and communicate. We talk a lot about that in a number of our programming. I do think that dads have to be on board. You really have to. Dads have to understand their role, certainly in education and in social development, whether they're in the home or not. Because a number of the families that we engage are, there may not be fathers present for whatever reason. Maybe they're in the military and deployed. Maybe they're in other places. But the important piece is that communication. What we've seen work all the time is when fathers notice bullying, that they address it. I think one of the other pieces that someone mentioned early on, which I think is so right on, is that watching fathers watching their own behavior. As I told some other people, we had a father who said, he watched his kid one day bossing around his friends in the backyard, and he goes, I wonder where he gets that behavior from. And then he was telling his kid to go to the garage to get something, and he noticed that both the language and the tone in which he sent that kid off to that garage to retrieve this tool. And he said he began to understand that, whoa, wow, I know exactly where that comes from. But I do think, that what we've seen work primarily is that, as you see bullying, as dads are there bullying, whether you see bullying or the bullying of another child, speak up to those other parents, be able to, and you do it in a way that's constructive. Again, we're there to help all the children, including the bully. So I think that's very important.
Thank you. We're going to go now to our last segment of today's webinar. I think from what you guys have each shared, but also you also left us a wealth of resource material, whether it be links or actual documents that people can actually visit. Want to continue in the same space and ask our continued feedback requests of our participants. And so what we're going to show you now on our screen are a couple of questions. We're looking to continue to develop these type of rich webinars throughout the year and want to find out from you what are hot topics that we should be focusing. So on the screen, you're going to now see a set of questions. They're going to ask you your feedback around what you'd like to see next. And so the question reads, our next webinar will focus on the broad topic of health issues for fathers and families would you like to learn about? And you get to pick one. The first is fathers' physical health, and we give a couple of examples, accessing health care, awareness of diabetes, heart healthy, checking your cholesterol. Fathers' mental health, this is somewhat connected to the whole mental, physical, understanding and dealing with stress and traumatic experience, depression. Family nutrition, healthy eating on a budget, understanding nutritional labels on food products, healthy food choice, and then we have an other box that allows you to kind of express what you'd like to hear and see in our next set of webinars. And so I'll give a few minutes for you to voice your opinion, and then we're going to move to our next set of questions at the end of this period. Okay. For today's webinar, we want to ask your thoughts, feedback, and opinions on how today's webinar went for you. We continually are trying to make sure we're providing information that is meeting the needs of the field as the field continues to grow. And so our first question is, I have a better understanding of bullying behavior, and you will see a number of options for you to weigh in with your responses at that point. Our next question is, I received good ideas and practical strategies that fathers can use to talk with their children about bullying. I received good ideas and practical strategies that fathers can use to talk with their children about bullying. And thank you for those of you who are voting. I'm seeing a number of responses, so thank you for that. We'll continue with these questions as well. Our third question is the general tips for how can address issues related to bullying as a part of parenting education classes were helpful. The general tips for how fatherhood programs address issues related to bullying as part of parenting education classes were helpful. And again, you have the same set of options. And our fourth question, in general, I receive good information and resources that I can use in my work with fathers and families. In general, I received good information and resources that I can use in my work with fathers and families. This again was a very rich webinar, and so I want to thank our audience for joining us. Our webinar as we're planning, and that's going to continue to evolve as we hear from the field. I would continue to encourage you to stay connected with us through our website, fatherhood.gov, on social media, which is very apropos based on today's conversation. It's a platform that is permeating all sectors of society, and one of our main ways of connecting with the field is through that medium as well. So please join us on Facebook at fatherhood.gov, or you can follow us on Twitter at fatherhood.gov. We do a really good job of following back and try our best to be very responsive to your questions and or your suggested resources. One of the things that I mentioned at the very top of the webinar is that our website is one that we continue to grow, and that is by in part because of the work that you guys do. So we encourage you, if you visit our website, fatherhood.gov, and you find things that there we'd like to hear about it. If there are things that you notice are not on our website that you develop or others have developed, please send them to us. Our email address is info@fatherhood.gov, info@fatherhood.gov. It goes through a process because we're a federal awardee where it's reviewed with our team members in D.C. from the federal government. Once and if they're approved, they go on our website, and then we continue to grow from that space. Last but not least, I want to express deep thanks to our three presenters, David Miller, Callahan Walsh, and Michael Knowles, who've each provided us with a rich and robust set of information around bullying. As we know, Lisa shared at the very beginning, is one of the most permeating issues that kids, not just young, but even older now experience. And so I just want to thank them each for their presentations. And I'll close with offering each of them, starting with David, then Callahan, and then Michael, a chance to make a final comment before we close out the webinar. So David, any final comments? And then we'll follow with Callahan and then Michael.
Just encouraging dads to really stay connected in the midst of, the busy work week and all of the other responsibilities of being a dad. Increase communication, talk to your children, and have your children teach you how to get on Facebook and Twitter and explore some of the range of other things that children and young people have access to as it relates to technology.
Callahan? Thanks, David.
Yeah, we just want to stress, the importance of communications between parent and child. Not only this topic and many others that we deal with, sometimes the parents feel that they don't know how to talk about it, they don't know what to talk about, and again, sort of why we provide a lot of the age-appropriate resources and talking points that we do. It's really all about, promoting and really helping foster these successful conversations with parent and child, or educator and child. Really, you can't get anything done without opening those lines of communication and steering the children in the right way. So again, just to stress, open lines of communication and addressing the problem head on.
Thank you, Callahan. And last but not least, Michael. Final comment.
First of all, thank you to the NRFC for inviting PTA and inviting me to be a part of this seminar. I just want to say, we live in times where it's all hands on deck. It really is for us at the PTA. This is no longer just a mom's job. This is a father's job. And whether it's father, a grandfather, or uncle, or cousin, that male presence makes a big difference. And so we just want you to utilize our programming to get more dads to come to your school, to be engaged in your school, not just your school, your after-school programs. But there are tools out there. You heard some great tools and some great information from the speakers, and I just think that, again, let's all recognize that today it's all hands on deck.
Thanks so much, Michael. There are several questions that we were not able to get addressed or raised, and so we also, in addition to posting the audio and also the PowerPoint from today's webinar, we do a frequently asked questions document. And so each of our presenters will receive those questions we were not able to pose today, respond, and then we're going to post an FAQ, the frequently asked questions document, in response to the question that we were not able to answer today. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'd like to wish you a great afternoon and happy holidays, and we'll be in touch. Thanks so much. Have a great afternoon.
And this does conclude today's conference. Thank you for your participation.